Good afternoon, everyone. This session is on secondary offer networks. My name is Mark Marrocco. I am the president and co-founder of Tightrope Interactive. We are a 42-person organization with offices in San Francisco, California, and Cold Spring, New York. Our company was and continues to be built on our ability to successfully market our products and services via SEM. We have two active lines of business. The first is in the for-profit education lead generation space. The second is in the desktop download space, which is the line that we'll be discussing here today. A little background on myself. I've been in the online advertising industry since the late 90s. Originally, I worked for a company called Everyone.net. They provided a suite of hosted website applications to site owners that were monetized through ad placements on the service pages. After that, I joined Tribal Fusion, which is a fairly well-known display network. In 2006, a Tribal Fusion colleague of mine and I founded Tightrope Interactive. In late 2008, in 2007, we launched our lead generation division. In late 2008, we started our download division with the launch of our secondary offer network web install. And that takes us to the topic of our session today, secondary offer networks. So what I hope to accomplish here today is to answer some questions about secondary offer networks. Many of you may be familiar with the business model, but you may have heard it referred to as something else. So what we'll do is we'll answer that question. What is a secondary offer network? We'll also look at how can you make money, or how secondary offer networks can help you make money. Who are the major players in the secondary offer network space? How you evaluate the secondary offer networks? And then we'll talk about compliance concerns and industry best practices. So what is a secondary offer network? Well, I struggle to define this because it feels like kind of like the definition needs a definition itself. But what a secondary offer network is, and what I came up with, it's a hosted installation monetization management solution that does two primary things. One, it presents users with opt-in advertiser offers during the installation process, and second, it manages the actual installation of the primary or the software vendor's product and the secondary offers, the advertiser offers. And the results of this include revenue generation from the advertiser offers and increased installation success rates due to the robust nature of these hosted installer packages. So, and to speak to what the other names that you might have heard for this kind of business, some people call them bundle networks, bundle managers, install monetization platforms. You've probably seen this concept around and maybe heard of it in some other terms. So I wanted to give you a quick illustration of what this looks like. Download.com is a partner that actually uses our install management solution, web install. So if you go to download.com, this is an example of the Revo uninstaller page. When you click on download now, you'll get this friendly window, this Windows prompt. Click on run, and then this is the first screen of the installer that you'll see. This is to opt into the Revo uninstaller product. The next offer screen you'll see is for the AVG toolbar. This one is for the Quick Share product. And then this final offer screen is for the My PC backup product. So essentially what happens is the installer presents the user with additional advertiser offers. Revenue generated from those additional advertiser offers is shared with the publisher partner. So that's what this looks like out in the wild. So the next question we'll answer here is, how can a secondary offer network help me make more money? Well, there's a number of different ways. Primarily revenue share, and that's a little bit what we'll talk about a little more in the next slide, but it's essentially that sharing of revenue generated from the advertiser offers. There's installer customization. So that's both in its look and feel and also in the way it functions. Both of those things can serve to increase conversion rate and ultimately the amount of yield you make from the installer partner. This, I think, is this third bullet point here is, I think, the most promising piece. It's offset outbound marketing costs. I think traditionally Most independent software vendors have relied on developing SEO and other ways of cultivating free traffic. These installer solutions enable you to generate revenue from trial versions of your product, so you can effectively offset your outbound marketing expenses or even make money driving free trials that can then subsequently upgrade to full versions. Another way these solutions help is by providing you deep insight into install metrics. So you'll be able to really understand how your install manager is working, what the start rates are, what the abandonment rates are, and really then be able to optimize for optimum or for peak performance for your installer so that you can maximize revenue. And then finally, you'll increase overall install success rates. So this speaks to the robustness of these installers and some of the components that they have that will just improve your install rates even outside of the extra revenue that you make from the advertiser offers. So let's look at each one of these individually. So on the rev share side, as I mentioned, the secondary offer network shares revenue generated from the advertiser installs with you. A key metric to note here is revenue per install. That's or RPI. It's the sum of total revenue generated divided by the number of installs. And the gross RPI that you can expect to receive from a secondary offer network depends a lot on the number of offers that you run and what types of offers you're comfortable with, but it'll generally range anywhere from $1.50 to $2. And then that'll be subject to the rev share. So the second piece of this is installer customization. So quality secondary offer networks provide highly customized installer skins that match the look and feel of your website, increasing user confidence and conversion rates. So before Yahoo Downloads was shuttered, and it was just shuttered relatively recently, they had deployed web install on a number of their larger products. Unfortunately, the powers that be at Yahoo decided that Yahoo Downloads was not to be for this world, and now is no longer there. But this is an illustration of how a branded installer really does kind of take that user from the comfortable environment that they're on the site to an installer that actually is just a reflection of that website. Other aspects of like behind the scenes installer customization is if you had a large library of products. Not all installer partners out there, but some may be able to dynamically build bundles. So if you have a big library of products, 2,000-3,000 products on your site, we can dynamically create offer screens and bundles for each of those products. So you don't have to build 1,000 bundles. You just build one, and we can source whatever file that is called, at the time that the user clicks or requests it. And of course, the offer screen will also dynamically be generated. So this is the one that I mentioned about monetizing free installs. So you can offset your outbound marketing costs, potentially go beyond offsetting them and make money from it. So what I try to illustrate here is first you'll see an ad for UPlayer, which is it's an internal media player that my company owns and we promote and we monetize with our installer. You'll see that ad for it on Google, and in this table below you can see how I kind of illustrate the running total. So in the beginning we pay 50 cents for the user click, and he arrives at the landing page, which you see just to the right of that of the ad image. And once they get to the landing page, we usually see about an 80% conversion rate to click on the download button. So at that point we'd be in the red 60 cents. And then once they get to the primary offer screen, the first offer screen of the installer, on the accept button for that, we usually see about a 90% conversion rate. So if this is assuming that your primary product doesn't actually generate any money on the back end, so if there was more revenue from that, you'd have to plug that into the offer payout column here for that primary product. But in this case, we're assuming it doesn't. So we're in the whole 66 cents. But then when we get to our the first secondary offer, which is typically a toolbar offer, we see about a 90% accept rate on that. The offer payout is about $1.20. And so when you factor in the conversion drop and the the rev share that goes to the secondary offer network, the publisher would be looking at about realizing 72 cents in revenue there. So that would take him up to being 1 cent in the red. And then on the second and third offers, he would gain 33 cents and 47 cents. So essentially what you'd end up with is you spent 50 cents, you made your 50 cents back, and you made 47 cents. And now you have an install. So you've made money while capturing an install versus having to pay for it. So I really think that this is a great tool for independent software vendors to use to drive installs of their product. They can now do it profitably versus spending for those installs or enacting these SEO strategies that may take years to come to fruition. Okay, so to speak a little bit to the install metrics, most secondary offer networks will give you deep insight into the installer metrics so you can optimize for maximum revenue. You can track by domain, source, geo, installer starts, abandon rates. So particularly when you're doing media buying, it's very important that you're able to append multiple variables to your URLs so that within the reporting system, you can look and say, hey, these installs that I'm buying from this source are making me money or they're not making me money. So it's key that you are able to see that sort of thing, and with these secondary offer networks, you can get that particular insight. And then finally on the increasing money, you can increase install success rates. So we have seen install success rates just of the primary product itself, even if they're imagine that there's no advertisers in the bundle at all, increase by as much as 30%. And that's due to 3 main factors: optionality, robust CDNs, and a stub installer technology. So optionality just means that we're able to detect the user's condition. So if the user happens to click on a link to download a Mac version of a file, but he's in a Windows environment, we can tell that he's there and then grab the right Windows file for him versus trying to download a Mac version that's not going to work. Actually, you could just put only one link there versus having 2, one for the Windows version, one for the Mac version. You could just say install now. He clicks on it, we could figure out what OS he's running or what system he's running, and then provide the right software. On the robust CDN point, most secondary offer networks use very high-end CDNs. We use Akamai and Highwinds, and the example that I usually I use is if you're downloading some sort of application and you live in Estonia, you're going to get that application from somewhere in Estonia versus having it have to traverse the globe, and so that's just only going to help your overall success rates. On the stub installer point, our installer initially installs a small stub installer that's very lightweight. We get it down there fast, and it can source the file from multiple locations. So if the download is interrupted at some point, we can just switch to another source. So it really has multiple failover, and that again will increase your overall installation rates. So let's talk about some of the players in the space. There's no shortage of them. It's over the last 2 years, this is probably half of the installer companies that have come up within the last few years. So Web Install is here. InstallCore is very big. OpenCandy is a Google-backed installer company. There's just a lot of them out there now. Conduit now, which many of you may be familiar with, they're big on the toolbar front. Now they have an installer product. So there's a lot of people out there. That's why the next point I wanted to go into is how do you evaluate these guys? So let's take a look at that. So how do you evaluate a secondary offer network? If I was a software publisher and I was deciding that I wanted to work with one of these guys, these are kind of the things I'd ask about. Customization and creative development services. Can their installer be customized? We talked about that a little earlier. Beyond branding, can they do those other things like dynamically build bundles based on my library of titles? Do they offer any free offer screen development? I think a fair number of the larger networks do offer those services, but you might want to ask because it could be important, especially if you don't have any creative resources or if you'd have to pay for them otherwise. Physical location, where the heck are you guys anyway? We have found Tightrope has, or Web Install has offices in both San Francisco and in New York, and we have found that a lot of our larger publisher partners really appreciate the fact that they can get on the phone with us and we can help them immediately versus having to send an email and wait 24 hours to hear back. So physical location is important. Coverage. How many countries do they have advertiser coverage in? How deep is their advertiser well? Do they have 5 advertisers or do they have 50? That's going to matter because the depth of that advertiser or the breadth of that advertiser base is what's going to be a main factor in your RPI. And what are their average RPIs? Ask them those questions. It's a little iffy. The reps will probably tell you a semi-inflated number, but I think it's worthwhile to ask. Abandonment rates, I mean, how good is their installer at keeping people within the flow? Do they eat their own dog food, right? Do they have any internal properties that they deploy their installer on and use it against? A lot of these companies have built an installer and they don't have any of their own properties. So it's like, how can you really be certain that they know the intricacies of this product and how it needs to be built and what it needs to report back to the users if they don't actually use it? To continue on, what kind of targeting do they offer? OS, geo, browser, product sniff, all these things are very important when it comes to maximizing the RPI. AV flags. Do they have any AV flags? And if they do, how many do they have? What are they doing to mitigate those flags? Do they actively communicate with the antivirus companies and explain to them the nature of their business? Demonstrate to them that they display all the proper disclosures to the user and that they give them a very clear method for opting out. Generally, AV companies will remove flags once you communicate with them, but they're quick to flag. They'll flag first and then wait for you to communicate. But if you pick an installer partner that doesn't have a comprehensive strategy for dealing with AV companies, you can find yourself having issues. Reporting, and that's something that we looked at a little bit earlier there. What stats are available? And the stats that they provide to you, is that enough for you to optimize effectively? If you're not doing outbound campaigns, maybe it is. Maybe if they just tell you how much revenue and you're comfortable with that, that's okay. But if you are doing a lot of active outbound marketing, you're going to want to see, hey, can I append a lot of source IDs? Can I, how much data am I going to get back so that I can effectively optimize my campaigns? It's probably helpful to ask them for a sample login to their reporting so you can get a sense of really what they have versus just going by what they say. And then can you customize the advertiser flow? So can you pick and choose which advertiser, specific advertiser, or at least what advertiser classes can run alongside your product? You may not be comfortable having a toolbar offer running alongside your product, or you might. You might not like the Weather Channel and you don't want to see their app against yours. If that's the case, fine. You should have the ability to restrict that. Some networks allow you to do that. Some are going to kind of force you to take what they have in the path. And then payment terms, timing. Do they pay you net 30? And then a very important thing to ask is, do they pay you on collected revenue or do they pay you on delivered? If they pay you on collected, you may believe you generated a certain amount of revenue in a 30-day period, and you might not see that revenue in the form of a check until 6 months out. So it's important that you kind of argue to be paid on what's delivered and versus on what's collected. So this is a little slide that I just dropped in here about using your own products, because I think that it's a very important thing. And if I know that a lot of these installer companies that I've seen come up, we've been around since about 2008 with our installer, and a lot of these new guys are around starting in 2010, 2011, and many of them are very simplistic installers, and I think they eat up a lot of people's time. We've tested them a lot on our own products. They'll reach out to us and say, hey, you want to try our stuff? Oh, sure, we'll give it a try. We try it. It monetizes very poorly against what we have in place. So that's why I think it's really important to ask the companies that you're working with, who's using your product, and if they don't have their internal sites, any internal sites, ask them to speak to some of their references, existing publisher partners, get their feedback. Hey, how is it working with these guys? Are they responsive? Do they pay on time? do I get the flexibility that I need to optimize my campaigns? So finally, we'll talk a little bit about compliance concerns. So disclosure is really the biggest thing. There's no body that really governs our particular space. I think Google, lots of people advertise on Google, and Google has some relatively clear policies on on bundling. So a lot of what's out there and a lot of the compliance that people are adhering to is dictated by Google. One thing that's important is that the installer has a digital signature. If it doesn't, it's immediately going to raise a flag with the user. Who is this? Where is this software coming from? Where is this installer coming from? Most offer screens, or actually all offer screens, need to include EULA and links to the EULA privacy policy and uninstall instructions. All of this is pretty much mandated by Google, and if you want to advertise your products there. And the name of the product that's displayed on the offer screen also needs to be the name of the product in add and remove programs so that the user can easily remove it. So I think that the whole bundle industry has changed quite a bit. Several years ago, it was a lot more nefarious. I think with the rise of mobile apps, people have become very accustomed to downloading applications, and it's not as scary as a thing as it was in the past. That, coupled with the fact that all of the companies that are big in this install monetization space are really doing everything they can to disclose to the user what they're getting and make it easy for them to get rid of it if they don't need it. So the whole industry is transforming. So if there's any legacy concerns about what it means to bundle products with your particular products, I think you should take time to give these secondary offer networks a look and come to them with a fresh set of eyes and see if what they're doing now might not make you feel comfortable about leveraging these guys to help you either make more money from the installs that you're currently driving or buy installations through these networks. So that's it. It's a little, excuse me. So I'm happy to take any questions that you guys have, or anyone?
So secondary offer networks, you mentioned that there's other names for it. In certain segments, it's gotten kind of bad rap. Feel like to address anything in terms of it sounds like a number of companies are trying to address that specifically.
Yeah, it goes back to some missteps that, 10 years ago, people that were bundling things weren't disclosing anything to the user. You download a particular application and all of a sudden you had a whole bunch of icons on your desktop, you had all kinds of software. I mean, it was a terrible thing. And I think that set a very poor tone in the beginning. And then more recently, a couple of years back, one of our big partners, Download.com, just began to monetize products without really telling any of their partners that they were going to do it. And that was a pretty big misstep. They took a whole bunch of bad press, or they got a whole bunch of bad press for it. They pulled back from it. But with these new technologies that really do disclose the information to the user and make it very apparent, there are some rules around how you do this so that the user can understand where these products are and get rid of them if they don't want them. It's become a much more accepted practice. And frankly, for a company like Download.com, they can't exist on the revenue that they make from CPM. It's from the CPM ads that are on their download pages. It's minuscule compared to the revenue opportunity of deploying these installers. So, you got to come to a point where you say, people might not be super happy about it, but it's a business decision that we have to make. And at the same time, if you would stop and take a look at what we're doing, it's actually above board, so you can be comfortable with it. So that's kind of where we're at. Over here?
How do you see the trend occurring with mobile and tablet devices merging to be the dominant players in space? How do you get onto those devices?
Well,
you're not going to get onto iOS devices.
Yeah, we're not there yet. We don't have a solution for. We don't really act in mobile. In fact, for as much noise as there is about desktops going away, desktop search queries are continue to rise, right? And the primary advertiser product within secondary offer networks are toolbars. So there is still a lot of growth in the desktop space, and it's actually marketing desktop apps is a much more profitable business because it can be monetized so effectively versus trying to market mobile apps. So our particular company, I mean, we think a little bit about Android and how we could apply this model to that universe, although we haven't really tested anything yet. I wish I had a better kind of explanation for you of how I thought it would evolve, but we're knee deep in what's going on with the desktop, and we feel like there's still a ton of opportunity. So but we are thinking about it, and I do think ultimately there'll be a play in the Android space. I don't know ultimately what will happen in iOS. They just don't let you in.
You said that you were partnered with download.com.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean all of the downloads that are currently hosted by download.com are wrapped around your web install?
A large portion. They have an internal solution as well. I think we do about 50% of their organic traffic, and then we monetize 100% of their SEM traffic. So if you search for any kind of major open source product on Google, and you actually see a download.com link, that's our web install product.
Okay, so if I uploaded my software to download.com but never gave them the permission to have my stuff wrapped,
Yeah, then it won't be wrapped, as far as I understand.
okay, because that would be,
Yeah, you have to opt into the programs.
okay, my next question would be then if I decide to go with you,
Yeah.
and then my stuff's already on download.com, what's going to happen if you partner with download.com?
Oh, well, if you have a separate, do you currently read, when somebody comes to your site to download, do you send them to download.com?
No, I do not.
Oh, okay, well then in that case.
Downloads, but I also have, I'm not sure if I have links.
Yeah.
I don't know what the world has done. It used to be, there was a link that pointed to my website and the download came from there, and then some people decided, oh, I'm gonna just take the download and host it myself.
Yeah.
So I don't know where it sits right now. I don't know any of that.
Yeah. Well, I think in the case that you mentioned, we won't be we'll handle the install on download.com. We'll monetize that through web install if you've opted into that program, and you'll get, I believe you get a portion of that revenue. I don't know the specific details of their program. But if you wanted to work with us separately, we would give you a separate link. You would give us the file. We'd wrap it up in the wrapper, give you a URL, and then you would deploy that URL on your website. So we would handle that install for you. Then we give you a reporting login, and you'd work with, Dan or another member of our team.
And how does that work with the PAT spec that the ASP is trying to get published? How does all of this work with that?
I don't know how to address that question. I could talk to you afterwards, and I can get the details on it.
How come you can't address it now? I'm just curious.
Oh, Dan, Dan here is our vice president of media. Do you know familiar with this whole pad thing? Yeah, I'm sorry. Dan's on the distribution side. I'm primarily on the business development sales side. So a technical question like that, I can absolutely get the details from you.
Well, I didn't know if there was a conflict of interest, that's all. I mean...
Yeah. No, I don't see there being a conflict of interest. I mean, if it's your product and you want to monetize it one way off your website, and you want to also get the exposure on download.com by enrolling in their program, then you should have every right to do that. But let's chat afterwards, because I'd like to try to understand more about what your question is, try to get a real clear answer to you.
I was just going to add in if I can.
Oh, sure, please.
I'm talking from Stalker. Download.com will allow you to, if you wrap with one of these different companies and you upload it there, they don't necessarily have to wrap it with this. I think your first question is it going to be double wrapped? So you've got it installed with some offers, and you upload the download.
Okay,
you can avoid that.
Well, 8 years ago I uploaded to download.com, but I don't remember these kind of installers being around when I created that when I created that relationship with download.com. So does that mean download.com can arbitrarily wrap anything that's on their site without telling me first?
Yes, that you have to look into their details. But I know there are a lot of download websites that host a lot of files, open source, Skype, a whole range of different things. And some of these download sites, the way they monetize is by having a solution which puts a wrapper and offers things. So that means that Now, whether that's part of a program, download.com pass back some of that revenues to the publishers, but a much smaller percentage than if you went directly with Web Installer with us, and we give you the lion's share straight away. So, of course, there's one cake, and it's about how you're going to slice it. PAD, in terms of the specs you can upload to lots of download sites, is something that we really believe in, and I think it's a very good way for you to get more eyes on your product. Because you fill in the specification of the file, the description and everything, and then it's like a text file or a config file, and then you upload that, and it makes it very quick. I mean, even from the ASP website, you can do an auto-upload, and then it will upload it to hundreds of different download sites. Now, there's nothing stopping the file that you upload being already wrapped, and then you're going to make revenues on all the users who download, whether the download site hosts it or it refers back to you. It's a wrapper, it's a bundle, and you're going to make revenues from it. So I think PAD is great, and I don't really see conflicts.
Thanks. Download.com, I know now if you upload your software, it's in their T&Cs. It says, do you want to opt into this program or not? I'm not sure what it was 8 years ago, but you probably can easily contact download.com and find out.
Okay, thanks.
So on one of your slides, it seems like you offer 4 additional things that a user can choose to download. And then you say a very high percentage of them actually install it. So that seems like, I don't know, I just find that hard to believe that like 70, 60% of people will install 4 additional pieces of software just to install yours.
Well, we do see very, very high conversion rates throughout the installer process. And also, typically our traffic comes from search, so there's real high intent. So if you looked at that uPlayer example, actually the keyword there was uPlayer, but even if it was media player, the user is really looking to download a media player, likely because they have some sort of file that they're trying to play. So they'll do this search is high intent. Once they click on that ad and arrive at the landing page, the download link is really one of the few link outs on the page. So there's a very high conversion rate on that. And then once the installer process launches, there is a tendency for the user to kind of advance through that relatively quickly, and that probably contributes to the high conversion rate. We try to make it such that the information is clear enough so that they'll pause for a moment at least to see what they're clicking through. But those conversion rates are pretty consistent with what we see regularly. So it is very high. And it's usually anywhere from 3 to 5 offers in the past, generally on the low side, 3. You saw those 4 offer screens there. The first one is actually the primary product, so there's only 3 additional advertiser products.
So you think a lot of people are installing it just because they're missing the...
No, I mean, I think there's a small percentage of that. I mean, there's a lot of disclosures there. So, we do everything we can to communicate that to the user, and hopefully they take the time to read through that.
All right, I just want to understand, so the first presentation, the first screen that was presented was the actual file that you went to get?
Yes, the primary product, we call it.
I'm thinking all of your offers came first, second, third, and then the last one is the one that you actually went to get.
Oh, no. The primary product comes first, and then they can decline everything else and just get the primary product.
Okay. And what about, you said the branding. Does the branding, like if I get a brand, does the brand get wrapped around just the primary product?
No, the whole installer. The whole installer skin.
What if you don't want your brand wrapped?
Then you don't have to. We have web install and download admin. So we have those 2 installer brands. You can use either one of those and have like a co-branded presence or just a full web install branded presence throughout the whole thing.
Well, if I wanted the primary download branded, but the other 3, I didn't want branded at all because even though you're using...
Oh, I see. There's a...
I didn't want my logo associated with someone else's product.
That's right. So on the primary product offer screen, it'll be branded for you, and then the subsequent offer screens will be branded for the advertising product. Yeah, and then the installer skin itself could be relatively generic or associated with the installer company's brand. So not necessarily yours.
Sometimes someone might associate, you guys also installed this. I'm like, no.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sure. This is great. I appreciate it. Does anybody else have any questions? I mean, don't hold back.
So can you exclude the specific geography locations? Like,
Oh.
can you exclude like Japanese?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You can geo-target, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the question was, can these secondary offer networks generally do geo-targeting? And the answer is absolutely. They can also target by browser, operating system, a whole host of parameters.
Jump in again,
Sure.
I hope it's okay. I think that's really important because, we look to global distribution, there's lots of users using software, but ultimately we all have home markets, places that are maybe more sensitive, or your software company is better known. So I think it's a lot of what these companies do, certainly what Installcore offer, is that you can customize it. So if you're sensitive about users in Japan, you don't want them to see too many offers, you can put it just for one offer, or even no monetization at all, no secondary offers. But then in other countries, let's say US, where you know the revenues are good and you can really push and make earnings, you can put 2 or 3 or vice versa. The important point is that all of these install companies, it's a service to you, the developers, and it has to work. If the user doesn't have a good experience, then they don't download, you don't get the install, no one makes any revenues, and it doesn't go anywhere. So the trick is to find that balance, between the revenue generation and the user experience, so that everyone wins. And I think the customization, whether it's with the branding logos, with how many offers you show, the IP exclusion, all of that is there as tools to make it work. It's not like you take it and that's it. You're going to get installs left, right, and center. Absolutely not. It's much more nuanced, and that's really how the industry is growing.
Absolutely. Thanks. Good. Anyone else?
Don't hold back. We know you don't like toolbars. Get it all out. Come on.
So speaking of toolbars, then, I know probably it's common for a lot of the people here. We tend to be the default tech support for our families, and we will go to their computers and find all these toolbars installed. And, sometimes it's an installer that was very clear. Yes, you're installing this, and people just click next and don't care, or it was installed and they didn't know. But since things are more on the up and up and are a bit more transparent, and you were talking about all the high acceptance rate, basically. I guess, is there any clicker's remorse that people are seeing? Is there any feedback from people who actually did download? Yes, they did install all these things, but are they conscious of doing it? Or
Yeah.
is it kind of...
With the volume of installs that we do, we occasionally, we will get some people come in because it's just high volume, and there's always going to be someone that's not happy and takes the time to tell you about it. So we do get a fair number of those kind of complaints, but I don't think it's significant given the overall volume that we do. A lot of those inquiries also may go to the advertisers, and we don't hear them. So that's possible. Yeah.
The person who's really unhappy, like what happened with Nico on Facebook, and he got the evil message because the guy had forced him to sign up to Facebook. Like, if you're angry, you're going to send someone a message. But the person who's happy using the toolbar and the functionality is probably not going to send you a message saying it's great. So the biggest percentage of users use the secondary offers, they're happy with it, everyone's happy. Then there's another percentage, which is a big chunk of people who maybe they did click next, maybe they realized that it isn't something they want, but they read the instructions, there's a lot of compliance, as Mark saw, there's an uninstall package. We actually offer uninstall a package, so you go to add remove programs, and with one click, you can remove all of the secondary offers, which makes it very easy for the user if they did something by mistake. So that sorts out them. So that's already like 80-90% of the people, and it's just that very small slice of the pie of the people who they know enough to know that they don't like the toolbar, but they haven't taken the time to work out how to get rid of it, or maybe they don't have the technical know-how like you do. And so it's that very small overlap of users, and those are the ones only who you're really going to hear from. The majority are happy, or they know a solution to move on and remove the software.
As far as the removal, do you have a way to track whether or not something got uninstalled after it was installed?
Yes. Yeah, we can track that. Not on the advertiser side, so like toolbars, guys, we don't track that, but for the primary products.
Anyone else? All right, great. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for an engaging conversation afterwards, and I hope this was informative, and I hope that you guys will take the time to investigate, Web Install, InstallCore, and some of these other companies, and maybe give us a shot, because I think you'll be really pleased with the service, the performance, and just the way the industry has evolved, and I think you'll ultimately come to embrace it. Well, hopefully. Thanks a lot.